If you stop trying, will the relationship still work? That's not a question most people ask out loud, but it's one a lot of people feel at some point. Because in many relationships, there is one person who is carrying more than the other. Not always in a way that's obvious, not always in a way that can be easily explained, and not always in a way that was even intended to happen. But it happens. And when it does, it doesn't usually start big. It starts small. It shows up in little things. Who remembers what needs to be done? Who keeps track of what matters? Who notices what's off? Who adjusts first? Who fixes things before they turn into problems? Who keeps the peace? Who fills the gaps? And over time, those little things, they add up. And before you realize it, one person is carrying more of the emotional and mental and sometimes even physical weight of the relationship than the other. At first, it doesn't always feel like a problem. In fact, sometimes it feels normal. You just step in. You just handle it. You just take care of what needs to be taken care of because that's who you are. You're responsible. You're aware. You pay attention. You care about how things feel, not just how they look. So you do what needs to be done. And for a while, you don't question it because everything is still working. Life is still moving. The relationship is still intact. So it doesn't feel like something is wrong. But over time, that weight, it doesn't stay light because carrying a relationship is not the same as being in one. And that's where the shift begins. Because when you're carrying more, you're not just participating anymore. You're maintaining. You're managing. You're holding things together. And that changes how it feels on the inside, even if nothing has changed on the outside. Because now, you're not just showing up, you're compensating. You're making up for what's not being met. You're adjusting for what's not being noticed. You're filling in for what's not being carried. And over time, that starts to show up in you. Not all at once, not loudly, but gradually. You start to feel it in your patience, in your tone, in your energy, because effort without balance creates exhaustion. And exhaustion doesn't always look like falling apart. Sometimes it looks like still showing up, but feeling tired while doing it. Still doing what needs to be done, but not feeling the same about it. Still caring, but feeling like you're doing it alone. And when that continues, it doesn't just stay as exhaustion. It turns into something deeper. It turns into resentment. Not because you don't love the person, not because you want to walk away, but because you feel like you're holding everything together and nobody is holding you. And that's a heavy place to be because you don't stop caring, you don't stop loving, you don't stop showing up, but something inside of you starts to shift. You start noticing more. You start feeling more. You start becoming more aware of what's not being matched. And that awareness changes things, because now you're not just doing, you're noticing. You're noticing the imbalance. You're noticing the effort difference. You're noticing the weight you're carrying that's not being shared. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that's where the emotional shift really begins. Because now, every time you step in, every time you adjust, every time you carry something that should be shared, you feel it. And that feeling doesn't stay quiet forever. It starts to affect how you respond, how you communicate, how you connect. Because when something feels one-sided, it doesn't just stay in the background. It shows up. It shows up in your tone, in your silence, in your reactions. Because now, you're not just tired physically, you're tired emotionally. And emotional tiredness changes how you show up in a relationship. You start saying less, not because you don't have anything to say, but because you're tired of explaining. You start expecting less, not because you don't want more, but because you're tired of being let down. You start doing more on your own, not because you want to, but because it feels easier than hoping someone else will meet you there. And that's where things begin to quietly separate. Not in a loud way, not in a way people can see, but in a way you feel. Because now you're in the relationship, but you're also operating independently inside of it. And that's not what a relationship is meant to feel like. Because relationships are not meant to be carried by one person. They are meant to be shared. They are meant to be supported on both sides. And when that balance isn't there, it creates strain. A quiet strain. A steady strain. The kind that builds over time. And often, it's not talked about. Because the person carrying more is used to it. Used to handling things. Used to making things work. Used to adjusting. Used to filling the gaps. But just because you're used to it doesn't mean it's not affecting you. Because it is. It affects how you feel. It affects how you connect. It affects how safe the relationship feels emotionally. Because when effort isn't matched, it creates distance. And distance doesn't always look like separation. Sometimes it looks like disconnection. You're still there, still together, still functioning, but something feels off. Something feels uneven. Something feels like it's not being held the way it should be. And that feeling matters, because if it's not addressed, it doesn't fix itself. It continues. And what continues becomes normal, even if it's not healthy, even if it's not balanced, even if it's slowly wearing you down. And that's where a lot of people stay, not because they want to, but because they've adapted, they've adjusted, they've learned how to carry it. But carrying it doesn't mean it's not heavy. And eventually, that weight shows up somewhere. in your communication, in your tone, in your connection, in how you respond to the person. Because now you're not just responding to the moment, you're responding to the accumulation. All the times you carried more, all the times you adjusted, all the times you showed up fully and didn't feel it matched. And that's when things begin to feel different. Not broken, but strained. Not over, but heavy. And that's where awareness becomes important. Because you have to recognize it, not ignore it, not push it down, not pretend it's not there, but recognize it for what it is, an imbalance, a shift, a weight that is not being shared. And once you recognize it, you have a choice. You can keep carrying it, or you can start addressing it. And addressing it doesn't mean blaming. It doesn't mean attacking. It doesn't mean tearing the relationship down. It means bringing clarity to what you're feeling. Being able to say, this feels heavy. This feels like more than I can keep carrying by myself. This doesn't feel balanced anymore. Because relationships require effort, but they require shared effort. And when that effort is shared, it creates stability. It creates safety. It creates connection. But when it's not, it creates strain. And strain, if left unaddressed, will always show up somewhere. It may not show up right away, but it will show up in your patience, in your tone, in your emotional availability. Because no one can carry everything forever without it affecting them. And that's why this matters. Because long marriages are not built on one person holding everything together. They are built on two people choosing to show up, choosing to carry their part, choosing to support each other, not just when it's easy, but consistently, choosing to be aware, choosing to be present, choosing to participate, not just exist in the relationship. Because a relationship cannot stay healthy if only one person is holding it up. It may continue. It may function. It may look fine on the outside, but it will not feel right on the inside. And how it feels matters, because that feeling is what determines connection. And connection is what determines whether a relationship feels alive or just maintained. And nobody wants to feel like they're maintaining something that's supposed to be shared. So the real question becomes not just, if I stop trying, would this still work? But why does it feel like I'm the only one trying to hold it together? And once you're honest about that, that's where the real conversation begins. That's where change becomes possible. That's where balance can be restored. Because awareness creates the opportunity for adjustment, for communication, for reconnection. And that is what keeps a relationship from becoming one-sided. That's what keeps it from becoming something one person carries instead of something two people build together. And that is how long marriages are built.